You held it in your hands. You heard its ringtone. And at one point, you probably thought, this is the best phone on earth. But just a few years later, it was gone. The company that once ruled the mobile world vanished almost overnight. This is not just the story of a phone company. This is the real story of how Nokia rose to power, refused to evolve, and lost everything. From the freezing forests of Finland, to the glass towers of Silicon Valley, to the moment Apple flipped the script. This is the downfall of Nokia, the giant that refused to evolve. And today, we're going all the way back to the beginning. Part 1, the rise from forests to phones. Before there were smartphones, before there were cell towers, before the word Nokia meant anything in tech, there was just a small paper mill. In 1865, deep in the forests of Finland, a man named Fredrik Idestam built a wood pulp mill near the Nokianverta River. That river would later inspire the name Nokia. For decades, the company made paper, rubber, tires, and cables. Nothing even close to electronics. But after World War II, something started to change. Finland was looking to rebuild, and Nokia, now a growing industrial group, began shifting toward telecommunications. By the 1960s, they were building radio phones for the military. By the 1980s, they had developed the first car phones. Then came their breakthrough. In 1992, Nokia launched the first mass-market GSM phone, the Nokia 1011. It was boxy, simple, and revolutionary. Voice communication over digital networks, that was the future, and Nokia saw it. By the late 1990s, Nokia wasn't just selling phones, they were dominating. Their phones were reliable, affordable, and everywhere. They introduced legendary models like the Nokia 3310, a phone so durable it became a meme. People didn't just use their phones, they loved them. By 1998, Nokia had officially become the largest mobile phone manufacturer in the world. By 2007, they owned over 40% of the global market. That's not a typo. 4 out of every 10 phones on Earth were made by Nokia. They had 110,000 employees, over $75 billion in revenue, and a brand that people trusted blindly. Nokia wasn't just a company, it was the king. But just like every empire, a storm was coming. Part 2, the threat, a toy from California. In January 2007 in San Francisco, a man in jeans and a black turtleneck stepped onto a stage. His name was Steve Jobs, and he introduced a device that made phone calls, sent texts, played music, took photos, and browsed the internet. All on one screen, with no keyboard, just a single button. The iPhone. Apple wasn't competing in hardware. They were building an ecosystem, one where users, developers, and apps would live together. That same year, Google launched Android, an open-source mobile operating system that any manufacturer could use. Google even approached Nokia, offered them a partnership. Nokia declined because they already had their own OS, Symbian, and they believed Symbian was the future. Part 3, the fall, stuck in time. Symbian was a beast, slow, complicated, hard to develop for. Nokia phones looked sleek on the outside, but inside they ran on clunky, outdated software. Developers hated it, users tolerated it. But Nokia refused to let go, even as Android grew, even as iPhones took over the premium market, even as developers built millions of apps for Apple and Google. Nokia stayed the course. Why? Ego. When you've been number one for too long, you stop listening. You start believing your own hype. You think you're untouchable. Internally, Nokia was a mess. Layers of management, office politics, risk-averse decisions. Talented engineers came up with touchscreen concepts, swipe gestures, even prototype smartphones. But executives shut them down. They didn't want to cannibalize their own success. By the time they realized what was happening, the world had already moved on. Part 4, the final move, jumping into fire. In 2010, Nokia brought in a new CEO, Stephen Elop, a former Microsoft executive. He saw the writing on the wall. In a now famous internal memo, he described Nokia as a burning platform. He said the company was standing on a flaming oil rig and had only two options: jump into the unknown or burn. So they jumped into the arms of Microsoft. In 2011, Nokia announced a massive partnership. They would ditch Symbian and adopt Microsoft's Windows Phone as their new operating system. At first, this seemed smart. Microsoft had deep pockets. Nokia had solid hardware. Together, they could challenge Apple and Google. But there was a problem. No one wanted a Windows Phone. The App Store was empty. Popular apps like Instagram, Snapchat, and even YouTube were missing. Developers didn't want to build for a platform with no users. Users didn't want to join a platform with no apps. Nokia's sales collapsed. Their market share plummeted from 40% to under 5% in just a few years. Their phones weren't selling. Their factories shut down. At one point, Nokia was losing $4 million per day. In 2013, they waved the white flag. Microsoft bought Nokia's mobile division for just $7.2 billion, a tiny fraction of what the company had once been worth. But the nightmare wasn't over. Even under Microsoft, the phones didn't sell. And by 2016, Microsoft wrote off the entire investment. Just like that, Nokia's mobile empire was gone. Part 5, the tragedy. They had it all. Here's the part that stings. Nokia didn't lose because they lacked technology. They lost because they ignored it. Years before the iPhone, Nokia engineers had touchscreen prototypes. They had App Store concepts. They had working models that could have rivaled the first iPhone. But the leadership said no. They were too afraid, too comfortable, too stuck. Nokia even had the chance to partner with Android, before Samsung, before HTC, and become the face of the Android movement. They turned it down. They thought they were too big to fail. But no one is too big to fail. Today, Nokia still exists. They make network equipment, 5G infrastructure. They're not dead, but they're not Nokia. Not the one you knew. Not the one that changed the world. And their story is no longer a success story. It's a warning. A warning for every company, every brand, every leader. If you don't evolve, you disappear. If you don't listen, you lose. If you don't move forward, you fall. The downfall of Nokia wasn't a sudden crash. It was a slow, avoidable collapse.
The brutal truth.
Innovation doesn't wait. Markets don't wait. Users don't wait. The world moves fast. And if you're standing still, you're already behind. Nokia's story isn't just about tech. It's about pride, fear, control. They were the kings of mobile. And now, they're just a memory.